Ooh.
Okay. So it's like it's crazy good. Setting up your webinar. Wow, it's taking long. Preparing the live stream. And we're live on YouTube.
Yay, hi YouTube.
Okay. So
yeah.
setting up your webinar. Wow, it's taking long.
Oh.
Preparing the live stream. And we're live.
There we are.
Yes, we are live also on the drinks. Already participants are coming. That's to fill up.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, guys.
Hello, everybody. Ooh, that's a lot. Welcome. Yeah. Ooh, that's quick.
Three. I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to say hi. There's a chat underneath. You can tell us where you're coming from.
Hi everyone.
Yes. Hello.
Where are you, Johan?
Netherlands.
From the Netherlands.
Berlin. Yes.
Good, good.
Hello, Adam.
Egypt, India. Wow. That's amazing. Cool.
Egypt. Oh.
Great to see.
Iceland.
Johan is asking Marty, can you allow the grid view? Maybe you have to do it from your
Is that better?
host. Johan, if I'm saying your name right, is that better?
Yes. Great. Barcelona. Oh, very nice. Wow. One of the perks of doing this remotely is that we get people from everywhere.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's true.
Yeah. So while we wait for some people, sorry, Joa, you were saying?
Someone from Singapore as well.
Nice. Yes. I was going to say, while we wait for some people to join, a quick intro to the environment. I guess most of you are pretty familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case, we are using a webinar format, which means you don't have a microphone, so you cannot speak. But what you can do is you can chat and you can ask your questions on the QA. If you look underneath in the bar, next to participants, there's the chat that is firing up right now. But also further to the right, you will see the Q&A and you can ask your questions there and also upvote questions. We'll be having some time with each of the speakers to answer those questions. And also at the end of the event, we can go through them. So just keep them coming. Yeah.
Hi, Benno.
Yes.
Some hellos.
Yeah. I'm gonna say we wait one more minute and then we will start with the event. It's really nice to see so many people, some known faces. Hi, Pablo. Yes. Yes, and just in case, we are recording this on YouTube. So right now we are having a live stream on YouTube and that will be there for you to check later. So you can always revisit what's going to happen today. Yeah, I would say maybe we just start, if that's okay with everybody. Yes, this is one of these things. I am going to share my screen. Yes. So I hope you all see my screen now. Welcome everybody to the Service Design Drinks in Berlin and everywhere else. Today we are going to be talking about futures thinking in uncertain times. You can see that for us, it's also uncertain times. We are doing this remotely. We would normally do it in person. Many things have changed, and we wanted to talk a little bit about the future. The first thing, and super important for us, is because these are the drinks, we would like everybody to have a drink. That does not necessarily mean alcohol. So grab a drink, some wine, some coffee, some tea, water. I have my tea with me. You cannot see it. Here you go. So I'll give a minute for those of you who don't have a drink yet. And while we wait, a little bit about the why we do this and what are the principles we have in the Service Design Drinks in Berlin. So this event for us and for everybody that participates, it's about inclusion. It's about meeting people right now remotely, sometimes when this did not happen yet, also in person. It's about leveling up as a designer, but also as a person, finding new interests, discovering topics that are worth exploring. It's about sharing and learning. And that's why we also want to have some questions and some time to talk after the talks. And it's also about speaking, practicing your speaking and coaching. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this later. And yeah, it's these are the drinks. So it's about having drinks, any type of drink. First, really quickly, who is behind the Service Design Drinks in Berlin? So the first on the left is me, Mati Ferrero. I'm a senior service designer at Fjord, and I come from Argentina. Then Mela, she is also a senior strategic designer at BCGDB, as is Gabor. Adam is also super experienced service designer right now at Zalando. And finally, Dee, you also heard her at the beginning. She's currently a freelance product strategy consultant. We've been all working on this for quite some time, but more importantly, we've been part of this community and trying to help build this community for quite a long time. This is our third or fourth Service Design Drinks this year, but we've been organizing the Global Service Jam in Berlin for 5 years, and we've known each other from before even. So we've been quite a lot in the community in Berlin. And what's going to happen today? Today we have 2 talks, first talk and second talk. We'll have some time for questions after the first talk and also after the second talk. And finally, we'll have some time to talk about what we just discussed and really anything that comes to your mind. We are open to having a conversation. So tonight's talks. The first talk is from Julie. She'll be talking about designing for sustainable futures. And well, Adam saw Julie at, I think he saw her talk at Interaction. And yeah, so they started talking about other things, and she's been sparring with him about design related topics. And we really wanted to hear her talk about this specific topic tonight. Which we are all interested in and we find it a very important topic at the moment. And Géraud will talk about how to present a foresight analysis, or how to talk about futures thinking in uncertain times, as the Service Design Drinks Tonight is called. And I met Géraud last September when he was attending an innovation week in London that I was co-curating. And we had a session over lunch, like an improvised session, to go over how do you do innovation in big corporations or in the government. And that was such an interesting conversation that we caught up recently, and I asked him if he would want to talk about that. And he surprised me by saying he had been going through this journey of presenting and talking about foresight and futures thinking in his company. So even better, it fits perfectly for tonight. But first, let's go back to Julie, and let's start with the first talk with Julie. And with that, Julie, please, your time to share.
Thank you. All right, I'll start by sharing my screen. Share screen. The favorite part of starting a remote talk. There it is. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Yuli. I am a strategy and experience designer, sometimes also called innovation consultant, and very excited about designing for sustainable futures. You can find me here in my natural habitat, standing in front of a wall full of Post-its. And I usually do research, design products and services. I tried a few sustainability startups myself back in the time. It was still like really, really hard, and probably still is. Then went into consulting. This is also me serving drinks at a bar in 2037 in a world without money, where algorithms decide what you get and what you don't get. And here I am talking to my regular customers, my regulars at the bar, and just chatting about what we miss most about money. So this was part of an immersive experience that I created back in 2017 with a group of other creatives at a lovely place in Berlin called School of Machines. Maybe some of you know it. And so we created, we went through this month-long residency program, whatever you might want to call it. And at the end, we created this 4-hour evening immersive experience where I invited people to join us to experience a world without money that we called Bargeld. We put together installations and artifacts from the future that we imagined, like, for example, this barter station where you could exchange your breath for this temporary cryptocurrency with which you could buy a drink at our stock market bar. And so the really crazy thing about this is that 120 people came. They each got a character to play. It was machine generated. And so you'd get a name, a group, kind of like, why are you there, your motivation, your goal for the night. And it was really crazy that 120 people came and they enjoyed it and they played along with us. And just together we suspended this belief and we really played like it was 2037. And this was really great. I really, really enjoyed making this and also started creating more of those immersive experiences. And as a researcher, naturally, I started thinking, wow, how can we use this as a research tool? So how could we, instead of just talking to customers like we usually do, how could we create an environment, a totally new environment, and put our customers or our clients or our users, the people basically, into this environment and interact with them? And also I was asking myself, how can we very intentionally design certain outcomes that we'd want to test? And also maybe how can we this way explain some things that can be very complex and like really far away futures. For quite some time, I was working on financial products, mainly insurance investments, where the main goal is preparing for retirement. And it's just really far away. So how do you bring that closer to people? And then also I spent a lot of time thinking about climate change, which is like, how do you make it more tangible, this really difficult to grasp thing? So I end up thinking a lot about futures and designing for sustainable futures, which brings us to the topic of tonight. And I engage in futures thinking because I believe that we truly need new ones. So what I would like to share with you today is how I got into this, and well, we just covered this part, why I think futures thinking is important, and also how can we design sustainable futures, or also for sustainable futures that we'd like to live in. And I have one ask for you guys. I cannot get any feedback in this online talk. So what I'd really appreciate would be to have you post comments, post emoji in the chat, and just this way give me a little bit of feedback of what you're thinking about all this. All right, so back to the show. We live in a time of crises. It's not just Corona, but it's also climate change. It is financial crises, it's migrations, all of these things. And I don't know how it makes you feel, but listening to the news alone is making me pretty anxious, let alone, like engaging in dystopian literature, like talking and like hearing a lot of really dark future scenarios that I feel like are out there quite a lot. And I find it quite worrying that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine this world in a sustainable, healthy and a fair world. And I know that Corona has truly turned our world upside down. It pushed climate change all the way in the background, but it's still there, and we will need to deal with this emergency as well. And what Corona and climate change have in common is that they're both quite a pain to deal with, because they require us to change our lifestyles, and they require everyone else to do the same. They start really slow, and then all of a sudden they move really fast. So they're really exponential, and they're also systemic. So the root cause and the effects that we see can be in very different places. Like, for example, climate change, or a changing climate, changing environment, we'd experience on the social level, in our economy, etc. And so to properly address those issues, you also have to distinguish between cause and effect. So for us designers, it seems like a lot of people, want to do something about this, want to include this in their work. And fighting Corona has been relatively easy for us digital workers, where we are forced to work remotely. We move our workshopping to Miro. Climate change has been a little bit more difficult than this, because it's just impossible to align climate goals with user stories and business goals. And it seems like things aren't really happening fast enough. And that the story that we're telling about climate change is a very complex thing. We're not telling that story very well, and that we need to do better. And I thought, who's good at telling stories? Well, fiction is, especially science fiction. We saw the flip phone on Star Trek. We saw interacting with gesture and touch interfaces on Minority Report way before they went mainstream. And so science fiction managed to create those entire worlds around science and technology, and they show the interactions between people and the social systems that they created for themselves. And so we need this for the environment, and we need to show how we can live in a healthy and sustainable planet. And that's why we need climate fiction. And I know that we already have a lot of news and social media and even climate fiction novels. So what is wrong with the stories that we are hearing about climate change today? Well, first of all, when you search for climate change, the first image that pops up is this. What's wrong with this? There are no humans, it's just a pile of dirt. And it's sadly not just this picture, but the entire front page of image search looks like this. A lot of times we use science speak, we use numbers, degrees of, temperature increase, tons of carbon emissions. And so we kind of like get a feeling that it's really bad, but why exactly, right? This is as if we were talking about coronavirus, talking about the DNA and the infection rates and incubation times, but really not talking about the symptoms on people. Here we had flattened the curve, we saw the graph, we got it. Then the next thing, it seems that climate change is not quite here and not quite yet. And I want to stress that it seems like that. And it's because we see global impacts, but not local to where we are right now, especially being here in Berlin, far away from coast that we usually perceive as threatening. So it's kind of like, where is Eurocentrism when we finally need this? And I'm not saying that those faraway places aren't important, because they really are. They're just not quite as effective when we're here in Berlin and we're not experiencing the same. Also, there's this really great climate fiction novel, New York 2140, which shows how New York would adapt if it was as flooded as Venice. But 2140, I don't think that I'll be on this planet, so it doesn't seem like a current problem to deal with right now. And a lot of times we'd also hear scenarios of 2050, which is still just slightly too far away, and they're not relevant for us right now. While Corona, on the other hand, we're dealing with it because it's in our homes right now. And even just 2 months ago, we didn't quite see the things that were coming. But then what surprises me most about the way that we talk about climate change are the doom and gloom apocalypse scenarios that I mentioned. A lot of them I know are jokes, but a lot of times we kind of do talk about oh, skyscrapers being entirely underwater and Statue of Liberty and tornadoes destroying entire cities and destroying them to the ground. And I really ask myself why it is that we focus so much on those dystopian visions, that we indulge in them so much. And there's a fine line between listening to our fears and letting them exist, and to actually start believing that this is the only way that it can happen, which is really dangerous. So for Corona, this is as if we are imagining, an entire healthcare collapse and leaving us entirely vulnerable, and all of the supermarkets being empty the entire time, and a second virus mutation hitting and wiping out all of humanity. How do these stories make you feel? Is it still what a time to be alive? Or is it, anxiety, stress, and having no agency whatsoever? It's in general not good to make decisions out of fear. They're simply not very effective. And these stories simply aren't working for the majority of people. They make people turn away and turn into a different form of denial. So the same way that good science fiction can inspire and engage people to build the technologies they saw, good climate fiction can engage us to implement the sustainable solutions that we already have out there. And what good climate fiction could do is engage people to show that it's about them. So what is in for me personally? It can catapult us into here and now, so that it's happening where we are. And it can show what we can do realistically with this. So as designers, creating visions, designing those futures, what's important for sustainable futures? Well, one, we can show human experience, we can bring it close, and we can make it protopian. Protopian is the difference between utopia and dystopia, but more like the realistic third utopia. I'll get more into this. So one, show human experience. Let's show how is climate change already affecting people right now. So how is it affecting their daily lives, their work lives, their personal lives? How is it affecting their hobbies and the ways that they spend their time? How does it affect, if you zoom out, how does it affect the entire system? So how does it affect the economy? But also, how does it affect smaller businesses and my own personal finances? So then zooming back in, what are the very small and mundane things? Like, what do I have for dinner on a Tuesday night? How do I get my groceries? What do we share with our friends on WhatsApp? Those very, very simple things. And Climate Visuals is this library of photos that is really good about showing the human in the picture. and it shows how climate change is affecting people right now, showing actual people in those pictures. Most of those images have a Creative Commons license that you can use in your projects. Then next, bring it close, bring it here, bring it now. How can we show the effects on the places where people live? How can we show them on a place they visit or that they have a special connection to? So for example, how can we pick a specific, just one place, neighborhood, city, and show this one climate issue that is affecting it? This really helps people relate. And then we want to bring it into now. So how can we show the effects that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? How can we show the things that will happen until 2030, which is by when we're supposed to have cut our carbon emissions? I was raised in Munich, and in my recent project, Urban Heat Island Living, I was exploring the effects that climate change would have on Munich and how people there would experience it. And so being far away from coast, Munich would have hotter climate. So like heat waves coming in, and the way that the city is built, it has urban heat islands. And those are areas that are substantially warmer than other parts of town. Just within a 10-minute walking distance, you can have a temperature difference of 6 degrees. And so I was looking for those little signals of how you can already see the climate changing. Like, for example, there was a beer bottle shortage at some point in a hot summer 2 years ago because people were drinking so much that the beer bottle production sites just weren't getting enough of their deposit bottles to produce more beer. So I was looking at those small signals and just imagining, what if these grow stronger in 2030? Just asking a lot of what if questions and writing little stories. And so I thought, what if the different microclimates of the city that might happen, what if people start foraging for wild mushrooms in the city, and there'll be an app that would help you find the perfect mushroom, the perfect climate for a certain type of mushrooms? Or what if we would keep the sun and heat away through sun reflecting curtains in our apartments? Or what if everybody started wearing happy compression socks to make sure that our blood is circulating right in the heat? So next I started asking myself, how can we get over the apocalypses and the other dark dystopian futures, and also the very naive utopias on the other side? Because both the dystopias and the utopias have a very similar effect of inaction. So how can we design something in between? And that's the protopia. So make it optimistic, but realistic in a way. Show the third way in between utopia and dystopia that is good and bad at the same time. And so what is relevant here for me, I think, is to understand this world that is healthy and sustainable. How does it actually look? And how can we explore really multiple futures to show them as alternatives to today, and really many like plural futures? How can we engage as many people as possible in creating them so that we gather all of these voices that are out there? And there's this really great project called Radical Ocean Futures, where this group of scientists explored 4 possible future scenarios that could happen to our oceans. And this is a methodology that Jérôme will also go into in his talk, how you create those 4 different types of scenarios. And they looked at, what if the world was sustained or collapsed? What if the world was connected or fragmented? And the cool thing that they did is that they tried to make this really understandable for people by first illustrating the 4 scenarios that I came up with. And they would also write a little novel from each of those 4 worlds or those 4 futures to have people read and just better engage with this world. And they also hired a illustrator to illustrate their stories. So another example from a very protopian future that I found very useful was, just as Corona was starting, my friend Books, who lives in Shanghai, he had just gone through the experience of living with quarantine. And he shared this article on Medium called Coping with Quarantine, Mental Health Tips for Life Alone. And I found this very, very helpful. He would say things like, remember to eat enough food, decorate your living space, take social media breaks. At the time, as Corona was just starting, it was just like, what? But right now it kind of seems like very obvious, like, yep, he's got a point there. He would also say, make a group chat with friends, start a new role-playing game with friends. Also really good advice. And then he said, when all plans get canceled, make new plans. Give yourself something to look forward to. They don't have to be big plans. They can be as small as video chatting with a friend next week, or nebulous setting an intention to go for a camping trip with some buddies when the quarantine is over. And this at a time as we're just entering quarantine was really the first thing that I saw that would show very, very concrete behaviors for the change that we wanted to see, that we weren't quite understanding how this would happen, but just having those very, very clear calls to action was really helpful to know, okay, so this is how I could start dealing with it. So basically, the point here is to give people a sense of, look what we can do together, the same way that good science fiction does this. And I know that we're still in the middle of a big worldwide emergency and a climate emergency too. And I think just instead of thinking of the worst case scenario, it's really worth engaging in the possible futures that could be, so that we can actually use, try to shape them. So we can imagine futures that we kind of want to have as an outcome. And so then the products and the service that we build can be used to design for those futures. So how can we now future together? And really, how can we build the world that you want to live in? Thank you.
Yay! It's, yeah, it would be lovely to hear everybody clapping, but we don't have your microphones on. So at least we clap. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah. How do I? Yeah. So I think we have some questions in the QA. Julie, if you want, you can open them and feel free to go through them. There's some good ones. I was checking. Yep, go ahead.
I'm looking at the Q&A window. Ooh, I cannot open it. I only have the chat window open.
I can read them to you if you want.
I can also stop sharing. Maybe this would help. Oh, yes, this works. All right. Question on top. How do you see all this movement of service design from applied ethnography design thinking to more future speculative design, future studies? If you moved like this, what would be the next moves for service design? Seems like this will be a general theme. So first of all, I don't think that this will replace design thinking and service design. I think this is like an addition that us as researchers, service designers, strategy people, it can be part of our toolkit that we use whenever something is more intangible or more abstract to grasp. And we just apply it whenever we think it's suitable. I think that experience design also is something that we could be using a lot more, especially as we are sharing research with stakeholders who sometimes don't want to be involved in research, don't have the time to. I think that, yeah, this is also, of course, a time of, a question of how much time and resources do we have, but also how can we better have people understand what we saw in research, how do we translate it to them? Any other thoughts from the team, or should I just go on with the remaining questions?
They were all meant to you, so please go ahead.
All right, awesome. Next, how far do you think VR might help make futures more tangible? It might be good to experience an environment, but could it ever convey the human stories and interactions? Or something like a video game. So in general, I love this. I think that the more we can create those gamified formats, the better. Also, like physical escape rooms where you can actually have people go through it and play something. There's also this really great installation by Superflux, mitigation of shock. That is a space that you can go into, and I think that anytime where you have this really immersive experience, it can really help. It can really help with something if you really think also what are the goals that I want to achieve, so what I want people to learn, and really designing for this type of learning. I'm no expert in VR. I looked into it some time ago. I had the impression that it just takes a really long time to design something that is really well done. But if someone's, you know, a really good VR expert and can pull it off, I think that could be great, especially for things that are recurring. So not, you know, this one-time client project, but something like experiencing living with urban heat. That could be something that a lot of people could go through. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to add them. I don't know how this would look in here. How do you ensure that it isn't just educated people and designers coming up with different protopias? How do you get enough diversity? Yeah, so I think this is a really, really big part of this. And it's something that the emerging field of transition design is really looking into. How do you combine understanding this really wicked problems with experiential futures? And they would, you know, definitely you'd want to host workshops where you make sure to, or do research, host your workshops to make sure that you understand the problem that you're dealing with from all the different perspectives that you might get into. So you want to understand who are the stakeholders who are affected by this, even those who may think that they are not affected by this or they're not contributing. But, you know, finding those, including them in your research, ideally bringing them all to the same room where you define the challenges that you have. And so you'd want to include as many people into the project at the beginning, so that later on you kind of like have your free way of understanding these are all the voices, we got them all covered. And the more people you include at the beginning, the easier it will be towards the end, I think. Yeah. Oh, I would add how would involving African people, for instance. Yes, absolutely. I think that this is something that I would love to try. If somebody's here who wants to, you know, try this with me, I would love to have this international kind of like workforce working on this. So really email me or tweet me. There's also this growing body of work in Afrofuturism that is, it's more in literature, I think, and also some movies like the Black Panther, I believe. Where that has also been looked into, and I'd love for that to be be included more. Then next, are you using Jim Tater's alternative futures, Manoa School in my work? I guess so. I haven't looked into Jim Tater, but I've looked very strongly into Stuart Candy, who has been learning from Jim Tater, and Stuart Candy learned also there, and is now teaching at Carnegie Mellon. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of their work, and also this great game called Think from the Future that I can highly recommend when you're designing different types of futures. It's a really fun way to just practice a little bit on the side, or also bring it into your workshop. And it's free to download on the internet, Think from the Future.
Yeah, so just there will be some time for further questions at the end. And sorry to just stop you right there, but it would be maybe now it's a good time to go to the second talk. So we also have some time for Géraud. And then at the end, we'll make sure that we go through whatever questions we have here, and we can still all talk about it. Really, let's, I would just say, Géraud, your time to share and to shine.
Okay, thanks, Matti. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yeah, I guess so.
We do.
Yeah, great. Okay. Thanks, Matti, and the SDD team for the organization. Yes, thanks a lot. And Yuli, your talk was very inspiring, very different from mine, so that's great. And thanks for everyone for joining tonight. the interesting thing about me today is, you know what? I'm no futurist. Okay, I'm not a pro like Yuli, and as you can see, my professional journey was quite diverse with frequent shifts, and yeah, sometimes I had several jobs at the same time. And one of the trickiest questions one can ask me is, what do you do for a living? You know, it's really like, yeah, well, I've done some iOS dev and then product innovation and strategy. Well, I would say that since 2017, I'm paid to do innovation, and I'm working more and more on strategy, which brings me to, yeah, in 2017, I joined Romande Energie. It's an energy provider in Switzerland, and it's not a big one as E.ON in Germany or France, or yeah, well, or a big one you might have. You know, it's more of a local one. And it's great because as it's a big enough company, I have the opportunity to work on very, very interesting projects. And the story is about an email I received last September when I was with Matti in London, actually. Matti mentioned before that we met in London. And that's an email from my boss, you know, and at that time, I didn't know how to begin. I didn't know anything about futures thinking. And I received this email saying, you know, we have to work on long-term technological risk for the company, you know, CEO, CFO will be involved, blah, blah, blah. And it will be presented to the board of directors. Oh, let's have a short call about it tomorrow. And I was like, you know what? I would love a 3-month training more than a short call. And instead I got this short call and 3 months to deliver this analysis. And it was, okay, let's do it. You know, at the end of the day, just problem solving, we have an issue and we have to deliver something. And this talk gathers some knowledge and tips that would have made my life easier at that time. Okay, it's nothing more than that. I don't have that much experience. And yeah, that's 5 steps I used to create a story. And here the word story is important. Yuli mentioned it before. But I really want to say, like, when you are working with things from the past, even yesterday, you have some facts, right? You can build stuff on the facts. While when you work with the future, you have to build a story. You have to create new things and add some, it's more of a narratives. And as I had to share the story with others, in that case, directors, but, you know, whoever, you have to really build this story and think about who is a hero, how is the beginning of the story, you know, what are the challenges and how the hero will handle the challenge and everything. So it makes it more graspable, because speaking about the future, and especially with directors who might like the future to be like today, you know, it's a very, very tricky part. 5 steps, I said. So let's begin with the very first one, the past. You know, I mentioned before, when you have the past, you have facts. Okay, so what happened in the last X years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. Okay, how did it impact you as a company, as an organization, as a society? Okay, and direct and indirect impact. Maybe your customers got disrupted, and that had a big impact on your organization. If I unfortunately, as you can expect, this work I did for Romande Energie is super confidential, so I cannot share directly what I found in this analysis. But I will do some, you know, tips and or share you some pieces of what I felt during that time. So about Romande Energie, electricity supply in Switzerland is still a monopoly. Okay, and one would expect that there was no much changes in the last 5 years. And working on this step about the past, what happened was very important to show to this audience that we had some changes. For example, in this energy industry, we had the democratization of PV panels, photovoltaic panels, or the huge variation of the price of energy, or the launch of new EVs, you know, electric vehicles like the Tesla Model S. And this has big impacts on what is, you know, on the company at that time and what is the company now. Then something more about the present, and it's who are you in business with, okay? It's your partners, your suppliers, your customers. Well, you depend on them, right? So make sure that you think about them. And here I use some very simple tools from systemic design. I just map the stakeholders and I link them, with what's the kind of relationships we add together. Is it about revenue, dependencies, contracts, data, whatever, and you can play with this model to just show some knowledge about what's going on right now today. In our case, we use the revenue and we map the revenue, and it's amazing, the quantity of data that the finance team has access to. It's amazing. And so we created, but the issue with all this data is it's not really usable. It's hidden somewhere on databases and Excel sheets. But when you have access to them and you can map them and show them to the world, then everyone is like, oh, but I saw this one was way bigger, or I saw that this one increased last year or something like this. And you have some very, very interesting conversation about today and then tomorrow, because finance team has also access to budgets is, next year or the 2 next years. And I have to admit that this exercise of mapping stakeholders was very nice, very, very nice. And I had a lot of joy working on it and putting all those numbers here and there. It made it really concrete. That's the subject, that's the hero of the story. But we mentioned past and the present. Now let's go to the future. And the future is first, you can think of the future first with challenges, or in some books it's called forces, in some of it's uncertainties. So challenges and let's say the same thing. And we can list the uncertainties for your business or for your organization. Here, a very simple tool is to use this PESTEL framework. PESTEL stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. Okay, you try to find some factors which might impact your organization or your stakeholders following one of those factors. Okay, I know it was quite abstract, so let's think that we work for a big fast food chain, let's say McDonald's, and we want to explore the future of food. Okay, it's a very simple example. Okay, but it will help us really think with more concrete stuff. So I said, what might challenge you? And so at the beginning, you might think of, people want local food, organic food, and this kind of, let's say, I developed thinking, or I don't know, political thinking, and then there is this huge bias. And I really like the question we had before about, should we add more diverse opinions when we work about the future? And the answer is yes, definitely. So there is this huge bias, and you should reduce it by working with a team, and very diverse team. And someone before mentioned someone from Africa. Yes, from Africa, from Asia, from wherever, of course, geography, but also education, a job, a lot of diversity in all directions. But also this process will reduce this bias, and I will show you how in a minute. So you have first challenges, which might be biased, and then you work with a team, and then you iterate one more time, and you iterate, and then you add more diversity in the challenges. And then what you do is you select the 2 most important uncertainties or challenges. This sounds simple, but that's a tricky part, okay? Because this step is quite central to define the next steps. Of course, you can iterate, try one challenge, then change it, then go to the next one. Yes, you can iterate, of course, but still, it's tricky part. And sometimes you put 2 challenges together, or you have really to work with this raw material. And then when you have those two big challenges, you can go and find weak signals. Yuli mentioned before this number of beers, you know, and in that case, it might be the number of baskets of vegetables or this kind of weak signals. And also strong signals, you know, sometimes it might be a change in the regulation. And this is not a weak signal, it's really a very strong thing. Okay, so you have two uncertainties. And with those two, we will define the extremes. So if we go back to this McDonald's examples, we can define people want organic food, and the two extremes might be organic and local food versus industrial food. Okay, and here with the process, as you take both extremes, you are reducing the bias. Okay, because maybe you wanted organic and local food. Yeah, that's one thing. But you know, what is the opposite of it? And then you reduce by design this big bias. When you have the extremes, you combine them, and boom, you have this matrix. Okay, Yuli mentioned it before, and here we are. And when we have this matrix, we will work to add some depth about each of those futures. So, for example, we have eat out, eat at home, and organic and local, and industrial. And we might have those four futures. Top right, fast food, eat out, industrial food. And this one is quite interesting because most of the time you'll find a business as usual future. You know, it's like today, but a bit more, not big changes. And then you have the two futures which are close to it, which is this Michelin star restaurant, where people don't want to eat industrial food, but they still want to eat outside. They still want to eat out. Or convenience food, they keep this industrial part, but they want to eat at home. And that's, for example, where this partnership between McDonald's and Uber Eats would help them in that direction. And then you have this other future, which is bottom left, grandma's recipe. You know, they want to eat at home with really organic and local food. And what is interesting about this one is it's kind of the opposite of business as usual. A funny story about this one. When we did this project for Roman Energy back, during winter, we had to put names for those futures. And the one opposite to business as usual, we called it double trouble. You know, we didn't find a name directly, so we put just double trouble. Like, if we go there, it's a big mess. And so when I presented to the executive board back in January, we hadn't changed the name of this future. It was still called double trouble. And in the note, the formal note written after the meeting, you know, they wrote like, thanks to the analysis, we have thought about the four futures, blah, 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 and double trouble. And we were like, no, but this was just like a placeholder. It was the real name of the future. Yeah, nothing big, but still it was like kind of a nice anecdote. And something about this matrix here compared to the one that Yuli showed us before, this one seems kind of today, you know, it's not really futuristic, but that's okay. That's okay. I mean, you can change the name and put something different. But what is really interesting is the concept of convenience food is industrial at home. And I will show you just after that how you add a bit of future to it. And yeah, also one comment about this is no one would accept, you know, that the whole world will move from one place to the others. That's not the topic, okay? Topic is not to say, yeah, everyone will move in one direction. No, what is interesting is to think about what if the market goes in that direction, or if some people like, I don't know, students, if all the students go to convenience food, for example, how would it change our business organization? And then you can really kind of map saying, yeah, if students go more and more, or let's say students buy more and more vegetable basket, then what does it mean for us and for the rest of maybe our customers? So I said 4 futures, and out of the 4 futures, you take each of them and you try to define them. And then, yeah, here is a story, you know, a small story about the convenience food scenario. As you described, please show as much human experience as possible. So yeah, it's linked to the COVID crisis, of course, it is trending nowadays. But then, you know, they like to prepare food with watching the 10th season of Casa de Papel. So they want maybe spicy and surprising food, you know, for this multi-sensorial experience. And that's the kind of thing that you add and you think about it. And then the very last line is about competition. And in that case, you might think that Netflix might be a competitor or maybe a partner of McDonald's, because people might prefer staying at home because they have Netflix instead of going to the McDonald's restaurant. One thing also about this slide is at the bottom left, I put this very simple version of the matrix that I showed you before. That's something I did for this presentation I did in January, because when you go in all those futures, people tend to be like totally lost. Okay, you are sharing so much information that people at some point are like, okay, what future are we speaking of? You know, it's not that easy for them. And to create those stories, you know, it takes quite some time. You want to make it realistic while futuristic. And it's always like, you know, it's kind of cursor and you have to put it somewhere. And as Yuli said as well, use all the science fiction novels, comics, movies that you can find. How people, in that case, how people, what is the relationship between people and food in those, in Star Trek, let's say, or whatever. Recently, I watched this movie, Soylent Green, an old one, a very classic one. And yeah, the whole movie is about this relationship between people and food. And after you have defined those 4 futures, then just define the one where you would rather play, okay? And here, just one thing, proactivity is the act of pushing to make a change happen, okay? So if, for example, you want one specific future, what do you do to make it happen? And this is very, very important, because, you know, it's not just like, okay, let's wait and let's see, oh, okay, this one is coming, okay, yeah, or we will lose some money or something. No, it's also like, okay, we have defined those 4 futures. We know that none of them will happen like this, but we would prefer people to eat at home, but industrial food, because at McDonald's, we can be very good at it. And here, for example, yeah, so in that case, McDonald's has this strong partnership with Uber Eats, but they want to push further. And that's a bunch of initiatives that I wrote down. You know, it's nothing really interesting, but the idea is really to work on those initiatives. To give you just a matter of timing, when we did this exercise for Romand Energy, it took us 2 workshops of half a day, no, 1 day with 10 people to build some interesting initiatives, okay? Because yes, you can say this Nespresso machine for food, okay, yes, but what does it mean for your company? Are you able to build it? Okay, so 5 steps that I shared with you. Where do you come from? The past. Who are you in business with? The present, your ecosystem. What might challenge you? Forces, uncertainties, what might change? And then if that change, what futures could look like? And here it's super important, it's futures with an S, okay? It's not one future, it's several futures. Here the goal is more about, it's not about prediction. I'm not predicting that will happen or that will happen. No, it's more about preparation. What if we go in that direction, or what if we go in that direction? And when we have those futures, yeah, select one and work on some initiatives. We had this discussion with Matti. Matti mentioned roadmaps. Maybe you can go just and reach a roadmap at the end of the day, but maybe that's not the goal for you. But really make it tangible. And as a conclusion, I would just say something that the sharing this work is absolutely crucial. Really think about this, how you will share it. Whatever the channel, you know, really design it as if it's a product. How you will share your work is a product. So you have a specific audience, build empathy with this audience. What is the context? How do they interact with your content? What is the user interface, if you want, of your research? What is the value proposition or the expected values they have of what you will share with them? Audience, yeah, sometimes your audience is your peers. It's easy, right? You share the same vocabulary. It's easy, but when you have to speak, in my case, to directors, both executive directors and the board of directors, then, for example, those guys, they really like numbers. Okay, they like numbers. So you come with a lot of stories and narratives, but you have to back that with a lot of numbers. And yeah, well, you know, as I told you, you have some numbers available. You just have to use them, you know, correctly. Okay, and again, yeah, this empathy with your stakeholder is critical. And that's it, guys. I hope that this short story will help you in, I don't know, your next exercise about the future.
Thank you, Jérôme. That's awesome. I see that there are some questions in the QA. So if you want to go through them, the first two were still from Julie's, but you can also take a stab at them. The first two, no, not anymore. The second and third.
Yeah. So first question is, how do you set the right environment safe space to immerse in futures thinking and role play? Yeah, well, few things. First thing is, I would say you need some trust around you, because you will go and discuss with people and you will speak about disruption, which might have a big impact on the job of your colleagues or job of your, I don't know, partners or whoever. So you have to explain them, and they have to trust you that what you are doing is not the new Uberization of their job. No, it's just about thinking about it, so you can act before, you know, maybe your competition does it or something. So I would say that trust is super important. And the next element that I mentioned before is diversity. Please add as many views as possible, both views from inside, in my case, the company, but the organization, but also views from outside. And we mentioned it before, views from, I don't know, any country of the world or any continent of the world. And just to make sure that you just don't have this European designer point of view, super optimistic, fighting climate change and who wants to eat vegan and local. You know, I'm not saying bad things about this specific point of view, but sometimes we are a bit like, you know, the view is really narrow. Yeah, great question. Where do you anchor your decision on going at a specific future? So to simplify, I said you have to decide just one future, but actually you can decide for a few preferred future. But the question is, it's based on who you are today. Because if you say in that case, that in my example, you said that you want to go for this convenience food future, it's because you think like, you know, McDonald's, we are good at industrial food, so we are better in that direction. And maybe it's easier for us to transport food from the restaurant to people's house than going with fresh vegetables. And in that case, it's really about, you know, what you have today, but also your vision of tomorrow. I don't know for McDonald's specifically, but in the case of Roman Energy, we know that we want to go for, let's say, greener electricity and this kind of thing. And we have the vision of the company. And we say that, you know what, if we go in that future, it's absolutely the opposite of our vision. So maybe the future which will happen will be this one, but we will do the best we can to go in the other direction. So that's more how we approached it. Maybe Yuli might have some ideas about this later on. Yeah, great question as well. How often do you need to revisit this activity and embed the preferred direction? How can it become part of the day-to-day strategy conversation and decisions? Yeah, so as I said, I'm part of the innovation lab. So for us, working on initiatives and what we will do was absolutely critical. And this iterative mindset is really part of what we have in this innovation lab. How often we thought about doing it every 6-9 months, but also it depends how fast your industry is moving. You know, if you are in this, I don't know, a transportation industry, well, go back to your slides. You have to work at the moment, you know, because due to this COVID crisis, a few things will change. So, you know, it's both, I would say, healthy to do it like regularly, but also if something big is changing, just, I mean, maybe it's time to do it right now. Something also about this is when we speak about future, people will say, oh, so this new future, when will it happen? You know, is it tomorrow, in 2 years, in 5 years? And the answer we had is, you know, we don't know, and no one knows. But what we know is we have listed a list of a set of weak signals and strong signals, and we will follow all of them. So it's more about following the signals and to see if we go in one direction or another, or to see if we go in a totally another direction, maybe. But it's more about following those signals. So to answer your question, revisit the activity might not be that often. Instead, there is some big thing, but I would revisit really regularly the set of signals. Yeah.
Maybe just because this is I think it's an interesting topic for everybody in the round. Maybe we can talk a little bit about it together. And I think I would like to also invite Julie again back, as we are already on almost 10 after 8. Adam, Mela, Dee, feel free to also join. Hey, you have faces. Yay. Yes. I think I was just going to say that these questions are really great. And one thing that is interesting about this thinking about the future and imagining futures is that you're obviously rooting your decisions on something. It's not you come up with a story and it's nice or it's terrible and apocalyptic. So I wonder if you guys have ever had to do this exercise in your companies, and if you can tell us a little bit about how that went or what you focused on. I see silence. Dee, Adam.
I'm so sorry. I was writing instructions in the chat and I didn't listen to what you were saying.
Okay.
Do you want to say it again?
No, I was just thinking, like, what's your experience with futures thinking? If you've ever done an exercise like this, and if you can tell us a little bit about the decisions behind it, not necessarily the exercise, but how you moved from one stage to the next, or how did you choose the future, like Joe was saying?
Yeah, maybe quickly, I have just some thoughts. Like, I think there's lots of different exercises, but an important thing, at least to get when you're working with people, like sometimes the people you're working with aren't used to thinking in this innovation designy kind of ways. Setting a time frame, like you were just mentioning, Jero, is like, let's think 10 years in the future. Let's think apocalyptic. Let's think, 2050. So that they have this in mind. It's really futuristic, is a great way to inspire those ideas and decisions. And then also doing something to get them out of their normal way of thinking, which can be really kind of small and closed, doing exercises or things that really make people think about silly things or things they never thought about before, like what would a 2-year-old do, or imagining a fake scenario and like painting that story, like both the speakers had, like imagining this story, especially Julie as well. The decision making, I don't know, but the inspiring, that's where I had thoughts on like how to get people really thinking in that futuristic way. What about others?
I've done some. Whoa. Let me try that again. I've done some other future thinking workshops in terms of, I guess, the traditional design thinking workshops. And how we normally did this was we had like the desired outcomes, and then we used this kind of like Vuvuzela cone or future cone kind of thing where you had the different circles of possibly limited stuff. I really like Darwin's question about the timescales as well. I don't know where it's gone, but I would also say like, people are really good at overestimating all the stuff they'll get done in 1 year, but really bad at estimating how much they'll get done in 5 years. So 5 years is probably my limit there, in terms of futuristic, in terms of understanding technology. But one thing that I love to add into future thinking workshops is also reflecting back on the same amount of time difference, because people are pretty bad at actually measuring time. So that's always really nice. Our Instagram, SDD Berlin, also has some great tools there as well. If you're interested in our latest posts on Instagram, just a little plug there.
Plugging.
That's enough from me.
Yeah. Yuli?
Yeah, I'm also thinking for the timescales. Yeah, like Adam said, it's just really difficult to think about, like we think about tonight's dinner and then weekend and our vacation, which might or might not happen, and like retirement, and there's nothing in between. So to help kind of like bridge this gap, it's also really helpful to help people map what happened in the field that you're looking at in the last year, in the last 5 years, in the last 10. And it sounds like something that Adam said, but I'm not sure if this is what he said, so I might have repeated.
Mm. And it also sounds a little bit like what Jero was saying at the beginning, like looking at where you are and what changed before. So yeah, interesting. Following up on the questions, there's one that says, how precise should you describe every future? Should you follow a business model canvas to be sure not to miss anything? Talk about value proposition, income, competitors, partners. So any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was about to answer to Cyril, and by the way, salut Cyril. Yeah, the thing about this, when we describe the futures might be more about society, organization, or industry, or experience of how you live, I would say. So it's not really about business model. So it was more about putting a scene to describe how it would be. But we use the business model canvas for the initiatives when we said, oh, we want to go into that direction, in that future. And then here we use the business model canvas to describe a bit more what we would do to go in that direction. Mm-hmm. Yuli, maybe you have some comments about this?
So I was wondering, what do you do featuring for in this case? Because I think that this also determines how precise you want it to be. Like, I think if you're trying to anticipate some kind of like future threat or opportunity, it could be more specific, like what would that be? And I believe that this is something that Shell was really good at. And maybe Jérôme knows more about how they were dealing with this. In my case, when it's about kind of like collectively imagining what is the direction we want to go towards, I think it really helps to become as concrete as possible. And this is where role playing can be just really, really helpful to kind of like experience those futures, so that we can kind of like set a certain scenario and then think like, oh, how would I, not just think, but actually do like, how would I interact in this kind of case, so that we can come to these very, very mundane things. Like I was saying, like, like what is it like to go grocery shopping these days? Because these are the really like the emotions that we experience that affect us so much, that I find just very, very powerful.
Yeah, I would agree. There's an intention when you're starting this exercise, and that will determine a little bit how much you focus on what. That's where you will put your focus and your eye, and you'll invest most of your time. And like Dee was saying before, sometimes it's just to open new ideas or to try to explore things, and then you can go crazy. But sometimes you really have a business question that you're trying to answer. And that's where you put the focus. So that's where you dig deeper. Yeah, it will be basically, I would say, depending on your intention. There is another one. Do you think I think this is to Yuli, based on the question. Do you think the vast amount of people in denial about these issues will change their minds? More about how could we help them understand?
Yeah, really, really good question. So I think that if you think about elections in the States where you have swing states, those are the ones that people go for when they campaign, because this way can actually make the biggest change. So it might take a lot of effort to convince a denier. And the question is it really worth our effort? And it might be, if we identify the stakeholder, that's like, this is the relevant stakeholder, and be like, okay, what kind of energy I want to put into convincing this specific person, especially if it's kind of like a decision maker or someone. But otherwise, I think I would go, like, if we're talking about, the broad majority individual action, especially when it comes to climate change, I would target the swing voters, so to say.
There's a question here, thinking about the future, question mark.
I think this was regarding the game, and I answered in a comment. It's called Think from the Future.
Okay. I hope Stein, I never know how to pronounce your name, and we met, so sorry for that. I hope that answers your question. Can you share some examples of metrics and numbers you shared to back up this story? Jero.
Yeah. So, as I said, when we worked on the this ecosystem mapping, systemic design at the beginning about the present, we put revenue. Okay, why? Because at the end of the day, the board of directors, what they care about is money. Yes, they also care about environment. We have at Roman Energy, we have 3 pillars, but yeah, whatever. At the end of the day, if there is big issue with money, yeah, that's what they would care about. So we worked on revenues, and then when we applied the 2 forces and defined the 4 futures, we said in that case it would impact this part of the business or this part of the business, and we ended up with amount of a business at risk with amount in more than 10 of millions of Swiss francs, which is euros. And then we had to work with those big numbers about, in that direction, in that future, we might lose this amount, or this amount is at risk. And then in the double trouble one, it was the same amount, which is huge, but we would lose this money very fast, and it was like the same sign as before, but I just added fast on it, underline, and saying, okay, guys, that's what we are discussing about. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of, I mentioned story before, but if we think about this narrative arc, then the emotion at that point was so high. People were like, okay, we are discussing about this amount just with stories. I was like, no, because stories, and we have this force, and they were like, okay, and then the question was, you know, what can we do? Just give us an idea, a solution. Just help us find a way to go further. And because yeah, well, you know, we said, yeah, but don't worry, it's not like tomorrow you will lose everything or this huge amount. It was like, okay, if we go in that direction and we don't do anything and we just wait, that's what we risk. And they were like, okay, let's do something. And so because my job is innovation, and sometimes it's like, yeah, innovation, yeah, do your stuff, play with post-its. But here it was like really call to action, you know. And because of these big numbers, they were like, okay, yes, we'll go. And it goes back to this stakeholder empathy. If you think about your audience, what they need, or what do they care about, then you think, okay, those guys, they care about money, they care about revenue. So let's speak revenue with them.
Any other thoughts about interesting metrics or figures that will show futures?
One really quick thought is that you don't have to get the numbers from your own company or your own customers or users. You can often Google and just find reports in other industries or similar companies that have already done some kind of analysis, and just steal their numbers to kind of back up your, like, look, this is how working from home impacted productivity in this other industry, but we can use those numbers here to show that whatever, yeah, you can steal without having to do weeks and months of research.
There's a
sorry, Matti, I just want to add something. So the topic of this analysis was about risk. Okay, so we add, it was a lot about risk and fear, and if we don't do anything, we'll go in that direction. Okay, but also in one of the futures, we said, you know what, in that future, this business will go up, which was, you know, also like, whew, okay, it's not only about fear and big numbers. It's also, you know, in that direction, it's where we want to go, and we will make a lot of money there. But we have to do something because, you know, the market might be good for us, but we have to act. Again, I'm speaking about money and corporation or whatever, but you can really do the same with any kind, I guess, any kind of futures thinking analysis.
Yeah, and you talked about proactivity and going in the direction you want and planning to get there. So you also use it as a way to somehow steer your actions. So yeah, that's also interesting, an interesting way of leveraging futures thinking for a company or for any project. There is an interesting question, I think, that we can all chime in. It says, as service designers, where is the intersection of futures thinking and speculative design? I suspect if we had futurist panelists, we would ask it in reverse. Where do you see service design fit in your role? Thanks.
Yuli, maybe. Now, yeah, I'm not really a service designer myself, but when we do service design with my colleagues, we do service design in two occasions. The first one is to map what, you know, we call it as is, what is available today, what is the state of the service today. And then it's also a way to prototype what the future might be tomorrow. And then if you define tomorrow as like the next day, then you don't need future thinking. But if you think a bit further, like a few years further, then yeah, of course, and you might need to do a little bit more than, you know, it's today plus few days, you know, it's something, it might be something different.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's kind of like a spectrum of the future that we're looking into. So in service design, innovation in general, we kind of like, usually we're very automatically or kind of like instinctively tasked with thinking about the very near future. And then the methods that we use are limiting in a way that we can, like, we try to talk, especially when we try to talk to people who are extreme users who've experienced something that we haven't experienced yet, it's kind of like shifting into a very like a near future that's happened somewhere else. And if this hasn't happened yet because we're looking into a further future, if we can't find those people, I think that looking into just different types of research methods can help us think about those futures. So I think just kind of like really adding to the toolkit, and I think it's probably really going to be a mix and a spectrum of all these things coming together.
Super. So we are 5 minutes till 12:30, where we said we would conclude our event. And first, I would like to thank both our speakers, but I would also, yes, claps. But I would also like to share a few things about the drinks before we leave. Yes, so the first thing again is we're done with the talks. We have our next event, and our next event will be on the 3rd of June. It's going to be about design rituals. We have our very own Adam doing the mini talk, and we have a very special guest for the main talk, which we will be revealing soon-ish. In general, we are doing this once a month, every first week of the month. So you can also look at our social media to find out more when the next event is coming up and what the event will be about. I will be sharing also our different social media channels. But the next one is about design rituals, and there's a date and there's a time. We're also building this a little bit every day. So if you know anybody that is happy and willing to sponsor us, get them in touch with us. And like I said, we have a bunch of social media ways to get in touch. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can also visit our website, sddberlin.com. And if you sign up to our mailing list, you will get the events before they are posted. And yeah, I think the last thing we have to say as a team is thank you everybody for being here. This is strange for us in a way because we are not close to people and we cannot hug you all and say hi and have these side conversations as we used to, but at the same time it gives us the opportunity to have people from all of these places that we didn't have before. And for instance, to be able to have Jérôme speaking from Switzerland now, and having people from the Netherlands or from Singapore, yeah, exactly, Egypt. So this is really, really cool, and for us is amazing. And yeah, we're very thankful that everybody made it here, spend their evening with us, at least for an hour and a half, and stay in touch, keep in touch. And here's our email if you want to say something or send us anything, we're around. And we'll be sharing back some of the things that Jérôme and Julie have shared today. So expect more from us. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.